our work is traditionally in the United States, but we were asked to speak. And I'm very happy to come here and speak about what's going on in our world and what's going on in the world of policy. Yes, so today I'm going to speak about the evolution of advocacy, where it started, where it is now, the evolution of patient-centered care, what that means, defining what patient-centered care means. There's a lot of discussion on it, but not a lot of definition to it. And then I'm going to discuss policy and how policy happens in Washington and how you implement science into policy and what that process is. And I'm going to give 3 examples: the Lung Map Master Protocol, Breakthrough Drug Designation, and the integration of the Oncology Center at FDA. The Breakthrough Drug Designation is a policy decision that we were able to get into law, into statute. And it simply started with the FDA asking a very simple question: what should we do when we see substantial new evidence in a drug? What should we do? And it seemed like it was pretty obvious, but it wasn't obvious. And it took us about a year to work with all sectors, companies, scientists, regulatory agencies, and the National Cancer Institute to make recommendations, because as obvious as it was, it really isn't obvious in every disease setting. And if you ask a statistician that question, they're going to give you a different answer. If you ask a patient, it's going to be different. And every disease setting is very different. So ultimately, we published a white paper and then decided to bring it into legislation. It was part of the drug user fee 6 years ago in Congress, and it's a statute. And what it did initially is we thought it would be 2 drugs a year, mostly cancer. Now, 4 years later, it's 250 drugs, and it's cancer is 60%, so it changed behavior. Patients are involved in everything we do. Patients are the North Star, they're the center of what we do. So we ask patient groups, what are most important to you? What are the outcomes you're looking for? Patients clearly want to get treatments that have efficacy and that are most likely to work for them. So when we ask patients, we ask them levels of risk, levels of tolerability, would they have 1 or 2 biopsies, what outcomes are they most interested in? And of course that varies, because when a patient has early stage prostate cancer or breast cancer, their risk elements are going to be very, very different from late stage glioblastoma or pancreatic cancer or lung cancer. So it's not one easy answer, and the evidence based on what regulatory standard will vary also. But certainly the patients are willing to take more risk depending on their stage of cancer. Good question, a very complicated answer. Breakthrough, first of all, is a legal statutory definition in statute in the law. So essentially, breakthrough designation is what FDA can give a drug if they see substantial early evidence. The way they decide that depends on the disease state and the preliminary evidence, but it has to be substantial. It doesn't mean if they get the designation that they will get approved. Now, of course, for a patient, that is a little bit confusing, and for the media, it's confusing, because it means there's substantial early new evidence that was unexpected. In many cases, it does work out, and the drugs do get a final designation, but in some cases, the evidence isn't substantial at the end after phase 2 or phase 3, and they do not get the designation. But it means that there is new evidence that is interesting, worthy of pursuing. Yes, Lung Map Master Protocol. So that is a lung cancer trial. We started it off with squamous cell. It is now all histologies. It's a public-private partnership between the National Cancer Institute, the Foundation for NIH, Friends of Cancer Research, and multiple pharmaceutical companies. And essentially, that's a genomic-driven trial where patients with specific biomarkers are given specific treatments based on those biomarkers. Those that don't have a biomarker are given immunotherapy. So everyone who's screened, there's a genetic screening, we're using the foundation platform, will have an arm. You know, many of the frustrations for patients in rare diseases is they're, in some cases, 2%, 5% of the population. And it's very, very, very difficult to find these patients, and many of them who are screened don't have one of these mutations, and then they don't have a trial. This trial has an arm for all patients. It is late stage, it's refractory, but it's also a registration trial. Well, it's exactly compatible. You know, the lung map, although we are in over 600 sites in the United States and in Canada, we're really, with the exception of Canada, not an international trial. And most of the work that we do at Friends is really based on the United States. So the fact that we are breaking down silos and the international part of what WIN is doing is extremely interesting to us and very important. Well, the take-home message is that the patient is always the North Star, working together, taking down barriers, being audacious, and the urgency and passion the patients feel, but they have to be scientifically rigorous, and it has to be meaningful for patients. So the idea of working together is really important.